Hello and welcome to another session of Let's Learn German. I hope you revised the contents of the previous session and you are ready to learn something new and exciting in this session. In this session, we are going to do Dative, or in German as it called Dativ, the third case, which in English is called the indirect object. Now, Dative or Dative as it called has got the article there, and after nominative and accusative, the cases with which you are already familiar with, this is the third case which we are going to do in our Let's Learn German program. Now, before we start, let us look at certain aspects of the dative case. Refers to the indirect object in noun or in the pronoun in a sentence. Dative or an indirect object is the beneficiary of whatever happens in a sentence. Dative is almost always a living thing, and also another important factor, not every sentence will have an indirect object that is dative. Now, let us look at some example and then it will be easier for you to understand the dative concept. Please look at this sentence. Ich gebe ein Buch. You are already familiar with all the elements of this sentence. Ich, you know, is the nominative or the subject. Gebe is the verb with the second position and conjugated according to the pronoun ich. Ein Buch is in accusative, which is the direct object. Now, if you see here, we have the verb geben, which means to give. So, here we have the pronoun ich, which means the person who is giving, that means the I, and the person gives something which is the accusative, which is the direct object. Now, the question is, who gets this, or to whom I, the subject, gives the book, and that is the dative here, which as you can see is here the Kind, which you know is child, and if you see before the noun Kind, we have here a word called dem, which is the dative form of the noun Kind, or the dative article as we call it. So, if we look at this sentence, we will see that we have enlarged this sentence to include the dative noun here, and here if you look, we have again the subject ich, the direct object ein Buch, which is the accusative, and a new element which is the indirect object dative. And if you go back to the aspects of dative, you can see that dative is almost always a living thing. So, we have that, and here dative is the beneficiary of whatever happens in a sentence. That means, the act of giving is received by the child. And if you look at this sentence, now as you can see here we have this new element, and now this new element changes the meaning of the sentence considerably. So, dative as the third case changes the article of the noun, as you can see it from the example. Now, let us see how the article is changed in the dative case. Now, let us look at how dative functions for the bestimmte article or definite article in German. You are already familiar with the definite article in nominative and accusative. You know there are definite articles which are der, die, das and die in nominative, and in accusative we have den, die, das, die. You know that the masculine article der in singular changes its form in accusative den, whereas the rest of the articles do not change their form from nominative to accusative. Now, let us look at how the articles changes in the dative case. Unlike accusative, all the articles here undergo major change. here there which was then becomes den, the which remains then accusative becomes there, thus which also remains thus in accusative becomes them, and the plural article which remains in accusative the changes its form and becomes den and takes an n at the end for nouns. So, as you can see, which I have marked, the change is happening for all the articles here in the definite article concept. So, if you see the ending, er becomes en, which is em in the case of masculine gender, ie or ea in accusative becomes ar or there, thus and thus becomes them, the and the becomes then. So, the definite article in dative for masculine as well as for neutral are them, and for feminine it is there, and for plural article it is then, with along with the n which is added to the ending of the noun in plural. Now, how do we use these articles in a dative sentence? Well, for that there are certain verbs which take a nominative, accusative and dative. Now that we have learnt the dative definite articles, now let us look at the verbs where we use the dative definite articles. A list of verbs which take a nominative, which is n, an accusative, which is a, and also a dative. So, you might be familiar with certain verbs here and certain verbs could be new. Now, we will do some examples with these verbs and see how dative definite articles are used in these verbs. Now, let us do some sentences as examples to understand the definite article or the unbestimmte article in dative. We would also see how in the sentence dative, accusative and nominative are differentiated. Now, please look at sentence number 1. Gibst du Frau Geld? Here, first of all, we have the verb geben, which is the conjugated form of the pronoun du, and du is here the nominative, and the accusative here is Geld, which means money, which we mark. And as I told you, here we have the noun Frau, which has got the article die, which is marked by F here, feminine category. We write the answer there, because here dative, as I told you, becomes the beneficiary of any action in the sentence. So, here the indirect object is Frau or the dative object is Frau, and here if the article for die Frau, as you know from the table, becomes der Frau. Now, please look at sentence number 2. Wir bringen Kindern Schokolade. Here we have the pronoun wir, which is the nominative. We have the verb bringen, which means to bring, which is the verb, and it is at the second position. And if you see the sentence, you can see that we have to first formulate the question, who brings? Now, for that we have the answer in nominative, wir. Who brings what? For that we have the answer Schokolade, which means chocolate, and the what becomes accusative. And now we have to see for whom the chocolate is bought, and that becomes dative. And as you can see, we have the dative noun here, which is Kinder. You are already familiar with it, and if you see from the table, we have the ending n here, which is for plural, which is marked here. Now, the plural article is die, and in dative the plural article becomes den. And I told you that dative plural, we have the article den and then n at the ending of the noun. Now, let us look at sentence number 3. Der Opa erzählt Mädchen ein Märchen. Here we have the nominative der Opa, which means the grandfather. We have the verb erzählt, which means to narrate. Now we have to see who narrates. For that we have the answer nominative der Opa. Who narrates what, and that what becomes, as you know, the accusative, the direct object, which is ein Märchen, and who, to whom it is narrated, that person becomes dative, and here that person is Mädchen, which means a young girl. You know the article of Mädchen is das Mädchen, and that it belongs therefore to the neutral gender, and das in dative becomes dem. Now let us look at sentence number 4. Der Chef sagt man nicht zu rauchen. Here we have the nominative der Chef. Der Chef sagt, the boss says. Now what does the boss say? Now we have to see, here we don't have a noun, but a statement not to smoke, an instruction. So that becomes here accusative, and to whom it is said? To the man, and that noun becomes dative. Now let us look at sentence number 5. Wir schreiben Lehrerin eine Grußkarte. Grußkarte means a greeting card. Now here again we have to first spot the nominative. We have the nominative as a pronoun, which is wir. Now we have to formulate a question, who writes? For that we have wir. Who writes what? And that what becomes accusative, the direct object, which is marked by a here, which is eine Grußkarte, and who, to whom is the greeting card written, and the person, as you know, who is the beneficiary of whatever happens in a sentence, and is always a dative and is always a living thing. So therefore Lehrerin, here we have as the dative object, and as you know the article for Lehrerin is die, which is the feminine gender article. So we write there, we write there because die becomes there in dative. Now let us look at sentence number 6. Schickt ihr Professor eine E-Mail? Here as you see, it is a question, a yes or no question, because the verb is at the first position. Now schickt comes from the word schicken, which means to send. Now the verb is conjugated according to the pronoun ihr. So who sends? It is ihr. What? That becomes the accusative, the direct object, and to whom it is sent, that person becomes a dative, the beneficiary, and here we have the noun, that is professor, and we have the article der Professor because it belongs to the masculine gender, and you know that there becomes dem in dative. Now let us do an exercise on a similar pattern. Now, let us look at the answers given by the student. Zeigt den Touristen Taj Mahal. Now, here the student wrote the correct definite article in plural den Touristen because the noun Touristen here is in plural, and also the student correctly identified the nominative and the accusative. Here, if we analyze this sentence, the first part zeigt means he shows. We have to ask the question what, which is the accusative Taj Mahal, to whom, then the dative, which is den Touristen. Wir geben dem Lehrer Bücher. Now, in this sentence, we have the nominative, the pronoun wir. Now, wir geben. Now, the question comes, we give what, and that what is accusative here, which is Bücher, and to whom do we give? That is Lehrer. You know, the article of Lehrer is der Lehrer, and their Lehrer becomes in dative dem Lehrer. Now, in sentence number 3, der Mann schenkt Zwillingen eine große Schokolade. Here we have the verb schenken, which means to gift, and the verb is conjugated according to the noun Mann, which is der Mann, and as you can see, the student has correctly written the nominative marker here n, and we have to ask now the question that Mann schenkt. What does the man gift? A big chocolate, eine große Schokolade, which becomes the accusative. To whom? That means the twins in German, or Zwillingen, and the article for plural is den in dative, and student has also marked the ending n, which is for the dative plural marker. Now, in sentence number 4, schreibt ihr dem Chef eine E-Mail. Here also the student correctly identified the pronoun ihr, according to which the verb has been conjugated. And now, if we look, are you writing? Now, we write something which is here in this context a email. To whom is the email being written? That person becomes dative or the beneficiary, and here we know the article of chef is der Chef, which becomes dem Chef. Now, in sentence number 5, sie bringt dem Kind eine Puppe. Here we have the third person feminine pronoun in singular sie, and we have the verb bringen, which means to bring, and it has been conjugated, as you can see. And now we have to ask the question, she brings. Now, the first question which comes to our mind is what, and that is accusative, that is eine Puppe. Puppe means a doll, and to whom does she bring the doll? That person becomes a beneficiary here, and here it is the noun Kind, which is das Kind, as you know the article, and das becomes dem in dative. Now, in sentence number 6, wir leihen dem Schüler Geld. Here again the student has correctly identified wir, the pronoun, as nominative. Here we have the verb leihen, which means to lend, and here now we have to ask the question, what do we lend? And we have the answer Geld, which means money, which becomes the accusative. To whom do we lend? And that becomes the dative dem Schüler. Schüler means a school going student, and know the article of Schüler is der Schüler, and in dative there becomes dem. So, in this session we did the case dative. In German, till now we have done 3 cases. We started with the nominative case, which is the subject case. We then went to the accusative case, which is the direct object case, and now we did the third case, the dative case, which is the indirect object case. And we learnt that in the indirect object case or in the dative case, the article changes. we saw how the definite article in German changes in all the singular and in plural forms. So, there becomes them, die becomes der, das becomes them, and the plural article die becomes den and n. And again I would like to tell you that dative case or the indirect object case is not always there in all the sentences. It depends on the verb. We did certain verbs and how these verbs generate a dative article or a dative noun. However, we can also make sentences with these verbs without the dative. With dative, we elongate or enlarge the meaning of these sentences. Now, I would like to again tell you that it is very important to understand dative, and it is also important to learn the verbs which take the nominative, accusative and dative. For that, please revise the table of definite articles which we did today for nominative, accusative and dative, and also revise the list of verbs as well as the examples and exercise which we did today. So, in this segment we learned some important aspects of dative, and in the next session we are again going to work with dative, where we are going to learn some more new aspects about the indefinite article in dative and some more new verbs of dative. And as I always say, please revise your verbs, the conjugation of verbs, the meaning of verbs, the nouns in singular and plural form, and also the articles, and also all the previous things which we have done in the sessions. I would like to tell you that in order to learn dative, it is very important to know the plural form and the singular form of the nouns and also the respective articles. So, please revise all of them on a regular basis. And as I always say, auf Wiedersehen, tschüss.